dungeon. Good AoE, and there's a pretty good single target as well.
Awesome. Well, let's get ourselves started right now, my friends, between Inertia and the boys as Waycrest Manor gets it started.
Yeah, you actually do see both teams instantly sprinting all the way through, running all the way towards Heartsbane Triad at the very beginning of the dungeon. You do see them pulling both of the frog packs off to the sides with those acolytes inside of them and looking to DPS them down, utilizing Demon Hunter and Death Knight AoE to be able to just obliterate everything. Somebody does end up getting MC'd on Heartsbane Triad there, and you see them getting stunned instantly to make sure that they don't pop cooldowns, defensives, or whatever. And occasionally you get your whole entire group Chaos Nova. So sometimes some interesting stuff can happen, but they do a good job there of CCing that person that did get MC'd.
Yeah, one difference you see in the beginning is uh the boys ran around the left side of the hallway when they went upstairs to not trigger the witch, while Inertia ran straight through the hallway, so they have the extra rune weaver, so that they can have extra trash. So we'll see where the difference is and where they make up the trash for the boys later on.
Do you think it's going to end up being a difference, like in terms of trash count? Do you think that that will allow them to like really skip anything? Because it, to me, it doesn't really seem like that's like enough of
It
a trash mob
it,
that
it
it's
adds
going
the
to enable
safety
something.
of maggots infesting. So you when maggots infest, you don't get the count for them.
Yeah.
So when they do the huge raw pull, which we'll probably see later on, they will not get the count for the maggots. So it gives them that extra buffer room. So if they miss the infest kicks, then they have the extra count without having to do an extra pull.
Yeah, something that we actually did just see there is Chaya is running that thing from beyond, so he's running enough corruption to be able to proc that. About how much corruption are all the players in this tournament playing? Of course, we saw now running very little corruption, but I feel like most DPS are running in probably like the sub 59 range, but pretty high up. Is that about accurate, Nerf?
Yeah, I would say most of the DPS are probably playing uh, around 55 if they're feeling brave and confident in their healers. But tanks, especially in this dungeon, are going to be running below 40, so they don't get the grand illusions. And we see here that the boys are already moving on into the courtyard here soon. They're gonna pull the whole courtyard. I don't think they pull the corner pack of the double thorn shaper and the thorn guard into the soulbound Goliath, and Inertia is looking to do the same here.
Important to note that if any of the mobs survive longer than the first couple seconds, they're going to need to make sure they interrupt that effigy reconstruct, or else all of the Jagged Hounds and Thorn Guards will be healed to 100%. So I don't think that's much of an issue though, because everything looks to be dead.
That's not dangerous. That's just called pad. Those are wit stats. Those are wit stats, dude. That's more tank damage.
Yeah, this dungeon really lends itself to the the Unholy DK style of pulling. There are lots of big packs of buffs to be pulled onto almost each boss, and so you really see a lot of damage coming out from those Unholy DKs on both sides here.
So what do you think the deal is with the Holy Paladin coming in from both teams? Do you think it's just because of that necrotic? Because obviously, like, raging is not super conducive to bringing your Holy Paladin, but you can't really AoE soothe or AoE and rage dispel. Do you
Right.
think the
So
Paladin like is just for the bop? Or
yeah, I think the paladin is just for the bop to clear the necrotics. You have two key parts that you're gonna clear necrotic in, since bop is a 5 minute cooldown, and this dungeon people are usually running around 12 minutes. So you get two good uses of bop. One would be on Rawl, and then one is on the last boss.
okay,
So we see both paladins still holding onto the bop, so they have it for the Raw pool coming up next.
yeah, yeah. So for those who don't know, the raw pull is actually very dangerous in terms of necrotic stacking because he is pretty rough to get a reset on just naturally because of how those blobs, those oozes do end up spawning. In addition to that, you're going to be doing a pretty sizable trash pull straight into it. So utilizing, making sure that you have the dwarf racial up, using bot plus strength of the warden also can be very useful just to make sure that you are staying low on necrotic stacks, because just getting high on necrotic stacks and like a tank death is going to be the biggest way that you're going to end up losing this run, just generally speaking, because of how necrotic ends up working out. Like, it in a tournament style setting like this, necrotic is by far the most dangerous affix. It looks like the boys were just a little bit quicker on their soulbound Goliath, and they do end up pulling everything into Rawl here, as we were discussing. You actually do see that Fel Barrage coming out, just making sure that all of this trash gets deleted immediately to make sure that Rads is going to be able to be staying safe. just in terms of necrotic stacks, making sure that he's going to be able to stay low is important here. I think from what I can see, he looks like he's about at 15 stacks. He may end up actually getting a reset here, which if he is able to get a reset, the boys are in really good shape. Yeah, so this is going to be fairly free for them to be able to now just DPS down raw. They may end up pulling some of the trash out of the kitchen.
Right, they did utilize their bop there, and he
Yeah,
was able to hold on to his stone form, so he did not have to use stone form. I mean, it does look like Trell goes down on the side of Inertia on that same raw pull.
oof.
Uh, I
It's
guess,
rough. I mean, that pull is just insane, and being able to
That's a rough
execute it.
pull.
Yeah,
and we are
being
gonna
able
see
to
a full
execute it.
team wipe out of Inertia on that same raw pull. So I'm guessing they either coordinated their cooldowns late or um something happened for Trell to fall because we saw after he got res is when he got the bop. So they weren't anticipating that death or using cooldowns earlier than that. So there's some kind of mistake there.
Another
Yeah.
reason why Paladin is good in this dungeon is that the typical strats don't really use any shadow melding, so you don't have to worry about having a healer that can be a night elf. So we can have the paladins in this dungeon, and you don't lose any of those important shadow meld skips. So typically, we're going to see Lightforge Draenei for that AOE DPS ratio.
Yeah. In addition to that, the tank is also going to be dwarf for that stone form, so you're already eliminating some of your like shadow meld strategies that you would think that to already be running. I think just generally the Pally is also really good damage in this dungeon, just by virtue of how Wings ends up working out, and just like making sure that you utilize the ability to be able to deal just freakish amount of DPS every 2 minutes as a paladin while doing ungodly amounts of healing is important. The boys have downed Rawl and are looking to make their way towards the lower part of Waycrest Manor now, clearing out the kitchen area. It looks like they're going to be taking one of these obelisks towards the lower level. Of course, they did change the doors in this dungeon to be able to stay open for 30 seconds, so you are actually able to make your way out of the room now. Originally on patch launch, you were not, but now you are.
So what I've seen them do in practice is they'll kill Samrak the Beckoner here, which is the fear guy, instead of taking him down because they're gonna do a trash pull in the cellar before they go down all the way to the basement.
So
So
what are they going to end up pulling there?
they're pretty much pull everything on that floor, including the matron.
Okay.
Rads will be able to get the spell reflect on the matron, which will increase the damage the matron takes. For the DK to do a big funnel damage onto that matron.
Yeah. Of course, DK funneling coming from those Festermite stacks. In addition to that, not unholy, Havoc Demon Hunter, just with Furious Gaze and Miraculous Fang, does insane amounts of AoE at the same time as well. Also running that Fel Barrage. You're going to see it coming through. Here comes that Fel Barrage right there, making sure that all the mobs get DPS down fairly quickly, and Rads is able to get that Spell Reflect off cleanly on that Decaying Touch is really important. Your Spell Reflect can get consumed here just by some of the Soul Bolts and some of the random incidental casts that end up coming out. So making sure that you do AoE stun or interrupt stuff that would come onto Rads while he's trying to reflect that Decaying Touch off of him is important. But it looks like that pull was done incredibly cleanly by the boys, and that was honestly just picture perfect.
Right, and then they go right into the boss pool with Lord and Lady Waycrest pulling all of the trash in that room. But since they use all their CDs in the previous pool, this pool I imagine would die a little bit slower, but it's mostly soul essences and then the soul charmer and the diviner.
Yeah, I mean, just Lord and Lady Waycrest can also be dangerous, but Rads, of course, does also have that spell reflect for Lord's Waycrest Decaying Strike. You'll end up seeing him probably kiting around the boss just a little bit like you did see right there. If you kite the boss around with Intervene and with Heroic Leap enough, you are able to actually spell reflect every single Wasting Strike back onto Lord Waycrest. It does stupid amounts of damage. If you were looking to play Protection Warrior on live, you probably should do that. It definitely is worth your time to be able to set up just with how you were running around with Intervene and whatnot. You used to be able to utilize flags, but now they made racing flags no longer work.
Yeah, the damage is definitely worth it, and it saves your healer from having to do healing. So your healer gets to also do a lot of damage playing that Holy Paladin.
Yeah.
So
But now
Inertia just killed Rawl, and they're heading on to that Fear Obelisk.
So unlike the boys, you'll see Inertia drag the Samrak the Beckoner down the stairs. They do not do that trash pull with the matron that the boys do. So you see him drag it down the stairs this time.
Well, something that you actually can see is different is Inertia is currently at like 80.53% trash count, whereas the boys, whenever they were at this point, were at like 64-ish%. So, I mean, it's just like monumental trash differences between the two teams, just a difference in strategy of how they were ending up pulling. I wonder if I wonder which strategy would have been better had we seen a clean run out of Inertia. Because right now, even with that full wipe, they're not like insanely far behind, but they would require a lot of help to be able to make up that time differential that they are seeing right now. As you do see, the boys here has Lord and Lady Lord and Lady Waycrest out at the same time, making sure that they DPS them down evenly. This fight is about to go down in a couple seconds. Then they're going to pull some of those hounds, being able to deal with the gloom horrors pretty quickly.
Yeah, we'll probably see them pull them straight into Gorak Toll and pull it with the 3 obelisk guys. But it looks like they're gonna shroud this.
Huh. Okay,
So it
so
looks like
I wonder
they'll
what
probably
they're.
do it after the boss.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense because it once the awakened mobs end up going, I don't think they're going to do it after the boss. I think they're going to do it during the boss, just after the awakened mobs end up going down, just to allow their pally a little bit more time to set up. Actually, no, they did end up getting the gloom horrors here. You can't actually see them, and they were just waiting. I think they wanted just like to prepare where they're standing. It's also interesting to see that their paladin is still standing in melee, and they're just going to face tank all those gloom horrors. That can be pretty dangerous, but I guess on a 17, you could just kind of blow up everything and it doesn't matter. Huh.
Yeah, with their bloodlust, they're confident enough in their unholy DK, killing all of those gloom horrors fast enough. And Bob did end up using his divine shield there
Yeah.
to protect himself from any of the gloom horrors jumping.
Yeah. So you can actually bait the gloom horrors if you are the furthest target from them. So yeah, Bob walking out of melee there, being able to bait all of those jumps onto him just saves the group a significant amount of damage, especially whenever you do have incidental blood of the corruptor ticks, unavoidable Samrek the Beckoner fears, just a bunch of random stuff coming out. But it looks like the boys here with the clean awakened pylons, Gorak Tool at 50% health. This was an incredible run by them. Overall, Inertia just had a few hiccups in the middle, just with like how resetting necrotic ends up working on Raw. So they did also have a pretty good run, but they just need to make sure that they're cleaning it up moving forward into the other dungeons. But this is a great showing by the boys, proving that they're like they've been practicing a significant amount and proving that it's actually paying off. So it's really good from them.
Right. And it is a clean run from them, 0 deaths. And they're about to take this first game in Waycrest Manor.
Yeah, absolutely incredible job here by the boys. And while we were going into this matchup, we knew that there was already a pretty big disparity between Inertia and the boys in terms of their time trial.
It's way too strong for the Mistweaver, so we're not even going to have that vitality conduit for Fu to kind of back up on. So they've only got the Dwarf Rachel to deal with that necrotic. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
Yeah, and I like how we were able to see, the idea of just overpowering necrotic and being able to burn everything down as rapidly as possible rather than having to worry about it. So we're getting ourselves started with game number 2 between Inertia and the boys as Junkyard gets.
Yeah, and first you actually did see some of the guys from the boys grabbing some bots, just trying to get a couple of those freebies before they end up doing their initial pulls at the very beginning that are going to be a sizable amount. You actually do see the boys there. Like they did end up running in, whereas Inertia here, now we're swapping their POV. They are already onto Gobbamak. You do see as many of those mobs, all those grunters in on Gobbamak. It's also important to know that if you do pull grunters into Gobbamak, if you activate the robot with this charged smash, the grunters will actually be killed by the robot if they didn't already get just beaten down by the Unholy Death Knight. But it is a really easy way to be able to save some time and some damage that you would otherwise be having to put into the grunters.
Right, so Inertia used their Shroud to go all the way to King Gobbamak in the beginning, whereas the boys spent their first 10 to 15 seconds getting bots. So the Inertia is just avoiding the bots for now, and then after Gobbamak, we'll probably see Inertia pick up the bots. The boys are now also on King Gobbamak. They chained in the pool a little bit after they started it, so they didn't go right away with the boss.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that Inertia didn't grab those bots. Generally speaking, on a 17 dungeon level, the spark bots are way less important than on something just a little bit higher. Like once you start getting up to those 19s, 20 level, like then the spark bots are incredibly important. But on the 17 level, especially with the gear that all these players do have on the tournament realm, the spark bots are a little bit less important, but at the same time, they are still like free damage that would otherwise just not that you would not be able to gain. So you do actually see the boys catching up on Gobbamak just a little bit damage wise because they did take that time to be able to grab those spark bots, but they are just a little bit slower, a little bit behind Inertia, as Inertia has just downed King Gobbamak, and they were making their way towards more of this trash, like gearing up to do a larger pull, just waiting for their cooldowns to come up. That's actually important right there. Is that they waited, like they used Gobbamak and their time in combat with Gobbamak to be able to gear up for a pull like this, getting just all of their Unholy Death Knight cooldowns and their Havoc Demon Hunter cooldowns back up before doing another pull. Like that's the important part, is just pacing in dungeons and how you're utilizing your cooldowns. It's way more important than people give it credit for.
That's
Right.
what all the practice gets you.
And with a huge
Knowing
pool
when
like
to-
that, with all the grunters don't they just have a fixate target. They don't target the
Yeah.
tank. So the necrotic gets spread out throughout the rest of the party. So the threat to the tank on those pulls isn't too high. To need like an extra blessing of protection so the tank can survive without having to use Stone Form or Bob to remove the necrotic stacks. And we do see Inertia activate the obelisk to fight Urgroth, the Breaker of Heroes. And they'll be dragging him into Trixie and Nano's room to do the next pull.
Thank
So
you
this
for
is
calling
also
him by his full name. I
this
appreciate
also
that.
acts as their down phase to get their cooldowns up for the next big pull.
Yeah,
So they're
and
dragging him onto that bot right there, and that's probably where they'll pop the.
I expect them to pull this 3-pack that is like standing right here into the patrol as well. They may end up grabbing the Bork pack as well. Yeah, okay, so they're gonna grab the scrap bots. Okay, so they're actually grabbing
And
that
the crawler.
weaponized crawler from the side. I think this is because they did spend that time to be able to get their cooldowns back up. They deemed the weaponized crawler is not as dangerous as it would like historically be with a pack like this, because everything is going to melt due to the Unholy Death Knight AoE, like we're seeing on screen right now. Everything is actually just getting floored by Undead Crank as he cranks the damage meters, capping out at a nice 800k. What a lovely stroll.
And some really strong Mistweaver Way of the Crane healing on that pull too. Just keeping everyone up through all of that AoE damage from the crawler and the blasters.
Yeah, a crawler into Trixie and Nano is very interesting. It can be dangerous, especially since they did just like you said, use that Way of the Crane into that. But making sure that they use stuff like Darkness, making sure that they do dodge Nano while he is on that motorcycle is important. But if they are able to DPS down this crawler, this is an incredibly efficient pull, just because of how effectively they're going to be in the boss combat the whole entire time regardless. So if you are able to just like pull in some trash while you are still doing the boss at really no cost, then this is actually a really good idea, especially since they do also have those spark bots to be able to do some passive AoE for them.
Right, and it's not a healing intensive fight, Trixie and Nano. If as long as you get interrupts on the Taze, Nano only does tank damage. If you dodge everything else, if you dodge the bike and you dodge his roadkill and his bolt buster, other than that, it's just damage from the crawler. And then we saw the boys. They didn't play the crawler that was up by itself on that platform, but they played the crawler that the Inertia pulled with the boss instead and fought the boss by itself.
Yeah, it looks like the boys are just going to be a little bit ahead on Trixie and Nano over Team Inertia. I wonder what the count differential is, because I see right now that the boys have 135 count, which is equivalent to 40.7%. I don't know exactly how much Inertia has, but I suspect it's probably pretty similar. They're doing an interesting strategy here. Okay, so Inertia is leaving the area. They're not even pulling those two packs to the left there in the Trixie Nano room. They're making their way immediately to Gunker. They believe that they can get trash elsewhere. Okay, so they're about 5% ahead of where the boys were. So they got more of their trash count from that crawler and from the Gobbamak area than the boys. So that allows them to run all the way to the Gunker area. So Nerf, you want to talk to us about these monstrosities and spell reflect real quick? This nice interaction.
So when the toxic monstrosity casts consume, it'll pull everybody into it and then leave a puddle that grows out from it, and that gives you a healing absorb debuff and a huge dot. As a prop warrior, you can spell reflect it and just stand in it, and it'll reflect that dot back onto the monstrosities. You will see the boys, since they are running the Mistweaver, they can either revival that dot off of the whole party since it is a disease, or you can just power through it with Way of the
Mhm.
Crane. So it's one of the upsides to having the Mistweaver over the Holy Paladin.
Yeah, because once the healing absorb gets healed off, then that dot stops doing damage. So if you're actually able to heal through that dot on the whole entire party, then nobody would actually be in danger of dying to the consume. But like you said, the revival also fairly strong to be able to AoE dispel disease like that.
Right, and we see the boys working on the Toxic Monstrosity pull, just like Inertia did, and Inertia's on that last Toxic Monstrosity by Gunker, and I believe they're gonna grab a bunch of trash and pull it onto Gunker for that Unholy DK damage.
Interesting. I like what trash would they end up pulling on top of Gunker? Because Gunker on higher levels can be dangerous just by virtue of the passive damage that ends up coming through. But in a dungeon like a 17, it's not normally going to be as dangerous depending on what the trash is. Like, of course, you can grab some no meaning slimes, which is like unavoidable damage, or you can get the slime elementals, which it looks like Team Inertia is going to do. They're grabbing a bunch of these slime elementals, making sure that they're using some of their stops on the slime bolts and on those charges to make sure that they don't die. But this is like a funneling tactic. They're utilizing keep your wits about you. They're utilizing Unholy Death Knight, Festermite, Revolving Blades to be able to just do as much damage to Gunker as quickly as possible, and it is really efficient. So this is actually a really nice pull here from Team Inertia. The boys as well, also on Gunker at a very similar pace. So this is a really tight matchup between these two teams.
Yeah, we'll see where the difference in boss damage comes up because the boys did not pull any trash on top of Gunker, and they just started it earlier. And Inertia took some time to pull some trash onto Gunker, so we'll see if Inertia can catch up in that boss damage to see if
Mhm.
pulling that trash was worth it onto Gunker.
It looks like Team Inertia has some people that are gooped.
Yeah, look like it. One thing to note on Gunker that you'll see a lot in different groups is people tend to revolve around the boss, staying in this bot to stay safe. But you don't have to stay in that the entire time. The only time you need to really worry about that is when he's doing the toxic wave, which is a wave of goop that he sends out from him. So you need to be in one of those ungooped bots during toxic wave to avoid getting the goop debuff. And when he casts Coalesce, but Coalesce just brings all the stuff that's around him into him. So if there's nothing behind you, you don't need to be in one of those bots. And the Splatter is the green stuff that you can see him cast that will goop anything on it. And if you stay out of the bots during this time and just avoid the Splatter, you can maintain the bots ungooped them, saving you from having to ungoop them at some point either by a dispel or by damage. So if you
Yeah.
just get into the bots when you need to, it's a little safe.
It does
In
look like both of them kill the boss at the same time, and then in this next pull, they're gonna probably do a huge pull going before they get to the last boss to make
Yeah.
a count.
Inertia is actually 5% ahead of the boys in terms of just trash percent. So I wonder what the difference in pull is actually going to be here. It looks like they may end up making their way through this area. Of course, there are some Mechagon Prowlers, which are those stealth cats that put that really nasty bleed on people, whereas the boys just running all the way in. I actually really like this pull. This pull is incredibly smart, whereas it looked like Inertia was like gearing up to do something a little bit different with some of the left side stuff. Whereas all these coil bearers and troopers with the renormalizer, and like the double cavalier pack at the very top, that was an insanely strong pull from the boys there. Whereas Inertia is doing just something a little bit different.
Right, so Inertia gets trash from both sides. So that side that came
Yeah.
from Gunker, and Leo went to the opposite side where you saw the boys pull the extra trash from. So they pulled trash from
Okay.
both sides.
And when they
Uh,
pulled that extra trash, they were able to outrange the rapid fire from the cavalry. So they were able to AoE down that giant pack without having to worry about moving out of.
and this
Okay.
is the difference here from the obelisk. So the
Okay.
Inertia played
Yeah.
the tank buster obelisk first, and it looks like the boys are gonna play Samrek, the fear guy, before pulling the boss. So Inertia is ahead, getting to pull the boss earlier than the
Okay.
boys.
So this is 100% risk versus reward. Inertia is going all in. Basically, if they wipe to this boss, then they'll probably lose. Whereas the boys are taking a significantly more conservative strategy, pulling Samrek. Basically, it's going to come all the way down to whether or not Inertia can stay alive while having all of these obelisks up. In a 17, and with enough practice, it absolutely should be doable. There's like some things like these robots that patrolling around, plus like just the dots and stuff that can make this pull
Oh,
very dangerous. Like we just saw, Undad goes down due to the ground effect because he was getting zoned out by those bots because they don't have a root. They just have the Ring of Peace.
Right,
And
so having the Mistweaver allows them to play the fear lieutenant on the boss because they can revival the first fear, and then they can target down the fear guy before he gets off too many fears.
Okay, so this is super bad. So they've actually enabled engineering battle res on the tournament realm, but Undead is their only like ranged battle res. He's the only class with a native battle res, so they have to have Blood of the Corruptor die to be able to clear out some of the ground effect. Plus, those walkie-talkie shock bots do also drop a ground effect as well. So being able to res Dad is going to be a daunting task just because of how much ground effect is actually out there. Maybe Leal can use his cloak to be able to engineering res him if he does get some time, but like. Dad being dead here at this point is really, really
They
bad.
do get all of the awakened mobs down and the
Yeah.
the
If
mini
they are
boss.
able to make it through, okay. So if they're able to
So
make
they
it through
get the res off
Got
here.
it out.
okay, so they're actually okay, but that was very scary.
But the big thing is Undead lost all of his bots dying, so we'll see if they can still make the one phase, killing the boss without Undead having the bots. They also do not have Lust.
They should be able to, right?
They should be able to. So
Yep,
what's gonna
plus
happen
one.
is all of the DPS and the healer are gonna go down once this overcharge
just
station
die?
gets low on energy.
Oh
And
no,
he
no,
drops-
he's slow. He just cheated. Okay, no, he's chilling.
So everyone is gonna go down except for Trell. He'll stay up to finish this so that they are in position to DPS immediately. And it looks like the boys have 2 deaths on their side and maybe a disconnect.
Okay.
So it's gonna be a full team wipe on the boys' side here.
Yeah,
And
it looked
Inertia
like
is
Kai had DC'd for a second.
So Inertia is going for that one phase on the boss. So the boss gets the damage amp in this phase, and it looks like they're good on time to kill this.
Yeah, just
Making-
making sure that they have all their cooldowns here is really important.
Making this a one-phase boss is really, really important for time. The time it takes for it to go up in the air again, the tank buster to spawn, bring that down again, do the overcharge station to bring it back down. Just going to Liaxa, but other than that, it'll be interesting to see what they do with them.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, game number 3 to decide the fates between the boys and Inertia. NA versus EU. Get started right now.
You know what I love? I love that Rogue is so underpowered that they get beaten by the tank in most of these dungeons now.
Can you relate to that a lot, Settles?
Absolutely. I absolutely 100% can relate to being beaten by the tank. Nerf just does too much damage, bro. I can't compete.
That's right, the Twilight Devastation. But we see a similar pull coming out from both teams, and the boys finishing the pull a little bit earlier than Inertia, and they are opting to go Shroud straight to Liaxa instead of play the Obelisk. And I believe we'll see Inertia do a similar thing here.
I like the skip on the Mask Pack. The Mask Pack is actually incredibly dangerous, especially with the Harrowing Despair. In addition to that, pulling Matrons into it gives it that hasted effect, where the Harrowing Despair cast will just go off almost instantaneously. It will be an incredibly short kick, so just foregoing pulling the mask in general is pretty nice, especially in this teaming environment where you're able to get more of your count elsewhere. It just seems like a pretty strong strategy.
Right, and part of the problem of doing the mask pull is grouping mobs on top of the mask. So if you want to pull mobs from the top, grouping the priestesses can be a tough task since they have a 60-yard range on their blood bolts. So you can't really get them down efficiently for the AoE.
Yeah. It also is interesting to see. You actually did see Undead Crank's Eye of Corruption being fairly small in this dungeon, presumably because of how dangerous like Eye or Thing from Beyond would be during the Cragmaul pull. Just like there's just too many variables. If you get a bunch of things from Beyond spawning, then you're going to be in a bad shape. Oh my goodness, this pull is insane.
Was this on purpose?
hell?
One
Oh,
thing
yeah, yeah.
on teaming with this dungeon, yeah, this was on purpose. But
Yeah,
if
this
you
is
want
on
to pass
purpose.
this pack, you do need to actually see one of the ticks there on teaming, or else you will pull them, body pull them. But yeah, this was definitely on purpose. They grabbed them all, and those ticks going off seem to be no.
It is possible to get in between them without CC, and you can also use Ring of Peace to knock the right side away and get through as well. But they're going to do a big pull on that, and Inertia doing a similar pull there while the boys are moving into Cragmaul's room, and we'll see if they do the whole room here or not. But it doesn't look like it since they used their cooldowns previously. So they're going to do a small pull here, and then we'll probably pull the remaining room with Cragmaul next once their cooldowns are back up.
How much time goes into like cooldown allocation discussion Nerf in terms of like just talking about like the team? You're just like, oh, we can absolutely do this pull if we have like a minute between where we're able to get all of our stuff back up.
Right.
Like,
So you'll divide which DPS is using cooldowns where. So the deep like in this room specifically, the DK's cooldowns matter the most. So in the break pools, like while the DK is waiting for his cooldowns to come back, you're gonna want your other DPS to be using their cooldowns there, to make that pool go fast.
Oh, okay. So you actually do see the rogue here, Petco, running that cascading disaster. You saw him get hit by a thing from beyond, and it spawned another eyeball on top of him.
Dang,
Rogue
so
Well,
is
you
he
by
had
see-
far the
the fixate.
yeah, Rogue is the best class at dealing with.
now they're gonna pull the rest of the room with Cragmaul and that Death Speaker skeleton pack into Cragmaul.
Did that Fell Barrage just get interrupted by the
by the Sonic
Bloodstormer?
Screech?
That's,
I think so, yeah.
That is so bad, dude.
And on-
feels really bad.
That's what
On the
what
side
you
of
like to
Inertia,
see.
they do a similar pull, and they are on Cragmaul with the rest of his room, but they did not pull the skeleton pack with Cragmaul.
Oh wow, they should have gone bigger. They should have pulled the skeleton plus Death Speaker pack too.
So most of the trash is dead here, and now the threat is going to be keeping everybody topped. It is a Tyrannical Grievous combination, so when Cragmaul does his tantrum, everybody's going to take AoE damage and have that Grievous stacked up on them. So we're going to see if the healers can keep up and heal that Grievous off.
Ooh, the boys ended up having 2 people go down, 3 people going down. Oh man, it looks like they're going to have a full team wipe here, just
It is-
because of those the Death Speaker and the skeletons.
Right, so the Death Speaker, with this comp, there's no soothe when they get the Wicked Frenzy off. So Rads either has to kite the skeleton or he has to tank it, and because he can't keep Bob can't constantly dispel that Wicked Frenzy off of him. He can get a reflect off once, but then he just has to start kiting. And that's where I think the difference is. Inertia did not pull the skeleton pack because that is a pretty risky threat if you can't keep that Wicked Frenzy under control. And we see the boys running back, so they're gonna have to get a res off since they do not have Shroud to get past the mask.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the coolest things about Underrot too, is just how much on a knife's edge it actually is just the whole entire time. Because sure, you can always pull bigger, like Nerf is saying, you can always continue to pull like the Death Speaker plus reanimated Guardians into Cragmaul, but at what point is it too much, and at what point is the risk just not really worth the reward? How big is too big in terms of Cragmaul? Because sure, you're always going to have enough damage to be able to nuke down everything, especially with how silly Unholy Death Knight is. But whenever it comes into question of how safe is the strategy, like what are the odds that we actually are able to do this correctly, then you just really have to think about how it's going to end up playing out.
Right, and also part of the danger of pulling trash onto Cragmaul is his spell order is RNG, whether you get indigestion or charge first.
Yes.
If you get the charge first, then the DK has to make a decision where you just use all of your damage on the ads while Cragmaul is out of the room to make it safer, or wait for Cragmaul to come back and grouped up again to do all of your damage. Or then it makes the pull a little bit harder because the mobs will be living longer.
Yeah. So not only that, but whenever he does do charge before indigestion, then you actually do get 6 more seconds of leniency in terms of being able to DPS down Cragmaul before he ends up doing that trample, just by spell queue order for no real reason. So you can save, if you're actually able to save a full trample, then that is a really big deal. If you're not able to save a full trample, then it's just like a matter of a few seconds.
All right, and we do see Inertia using the obelisk to skip that skeleton pack and the worm. So they fight Urgroth here instead of with the last boss. So they will probably do 3 obelisks with the last boss. And they'll probably do a big pull into the Spore Caller here because you can see they're at about 81% trash already.
Yeah, Urgroth makes sense to be able to do here. Sure, Urgroth by himself with Unbound Abomination would not be that bad, but whenever you're talking about in terms of pure speed, that Dark Fury cast pushing you out of melee can be fairly problematic.
Right.
It can be really just frustrating with how the boss ends up working out. Ooh, we do see the teaming. You got the Death Speaker double Defiler pack here, which this was a classic pack that a lot of teams wiped to during MDI season. So being able to down this pack requires incredible precision and skill.
Right, so part of the thing with doing Urgroth there as well, you can use all of your cooldowns on Cragmaul to make sure you beat that last tantrum.
Yes.
And then have it come back up for this pull here. For this big pull, you can see most of the Defilers got killed before they even got their second cast off, which is really good. And then you can just ignore the Death Speakers because the Raised Dead, those Guardians will just die anyway. They do insignificant damage.
That was a monk of danger by Dad there, getting hit by that upheaval, and then got hit by some of the spores.
And
They also
the thing with
probably
having
use immunity,
yeah,
right?
the Mistweaver here, you can revival off. So that first, you can just focus down AoEing down all those ads and killing the boss, and then just ignore the upheavals. Just make sure you get them out of the group, and then use the revival to remove the disease off everybody before it ticks and insta kills them.
Yeah, that's actually a really good use of revival. Just making sure that you hit it before it ticks, incredibly important, because
I
we've
really,
seen it in the past where somebody will just like miss it and just, all right, well they're dead, I guess.
I really like the Mistweaver in this dungeon, which pains me to say as a paladin. But the cooldown timing and the healing with Way of the Crane on Cragmaul is really great for those, especially on Grievous. So once you're back after the tantrum, you can use your Way of the Crane, because of course you have to do damage to heal with Way of the Crane, but you can really catch up and get out of that Grievous stack pretty quickly once you're back on the boss. And Revival is just so good on this boss here on Xantia to get rid of all that, and as well as on the Unbound Abomination.
Right, the
Uh,
Mistweaver is what enables the pull on Cragmaul, being able to wave the crane through all of the stuns from the lashers, since it is a healing absorb, and that revival, extra revival to the dispel. The boys have just killed the tank buster here, and now they're going towards Spore Caller, where Inertia is moving towards the last two mobs because they are at 95%. So they need those two mobs at the gate and one worm before they can go down to the Unbound Abomination.
Interestingly enough, the boys ended up pulling two of the Feral Bloodswarmers with this Spore Color Xantia pull. So there are like multiple Feral Bloodswarmers, or as Nerf likes to call them, the bats, that fly around on that right-hand side, and you can grab them out of the air and be able to pull them if you like. Normally, we don't see them being pulled just because they're like the most dangerous mob in this instance, probably. Just because of their fixate and the fact that they do an unreal amount of shadow plus physical damage while meleeing targets. So it is fairly dangerous, but they were able to do it pretty cleanly with just making sure that they have all their cooldowns available, like Nerf was saying earlier.
Right, so they grabbed the extra blood swarmers there so that they don't have to play that worm that Inertia did. So they only need the last two corruptors at the gate, which makes that pull a little bit easier because while you're trying to get interrupts on the worm, you can get killed by the tentacles or the maddening gaze from the corruptors. But Inertia is going down to the Unbound Abomination here. They do not have lust for this with 3 awakened mobs here.
Do you think they should have saved Lust for this?
So I believe they lust on Cragmaul just for the extra safety. But given the time of the dungeon, if to get a second lust, they would have had to lust the beginning pool, um, which isn't really needed when you have the unholy DK and there's just a lot of ticks, so you can get a lot of wounds up
Yeah.
and blow up the pack. So it's a toss up whether you want the two lusts for speed or you want the lust for safety on Cragmaul. But without the tank buster here, you don't really need the extra lust. You just need to focus down the fear mob because you have 4 kicks to interrupt the Void Weaver, and with as big a room as this is, you don't really need to focus down the blood of the corruptor.
That's fair. In addition to that, especially with MDI style stuff, Bloodlust is typically used as like a pull enabling spell. It's not really used as like a high damaging spell. Sure, it does give you group haste, but if you were able to use it in a way to make pulls safer or make like use it as like almost a healing throughput cooldown to be able to enable certain size or style of pulls, then you should absolutely be looking to do that. It makes a lot more sense, and it just makes your runs they're going to be more clean. That's also the case on live too, but just to a lesser extent because the dungeons are longer, so you have to make less drastic choices. Whether it's not going to be, do I get 2 bloodlust this dungeon or 1? It's like, all right, do I get 4 mediocre bloodlusts or do I get 3 really good ones? And you just kind of have to make a decision sometimes as to what is actually going to save you more time overall.
Right, and then with Inertia killing all of the awakened mobs, they just have the Unbound Abomination left.
Yeah.
And the boys are heading down towards the Unbound Abomination now.
And once these obelisks are dead, this boss is rinse and repeat. Stand there, turn around, bait the vile expulsion, and turn around and
Pray
do
you
it
don't
again.
get JB spored. Yeah, the classics.
Also, Tuttles, was that a drastic choice or a drastic choice?
Oh, stop that. None of that. Oh, JB spore.
Oh.
Okay. And Troll goes down.
Trail goes down, but they do have a battle res
I'm
available.
dead. Battle res instantly.
and they're able to kill. They're able to spawn the last blood add kill and able to finish up the dungeon in 1302.
Oh man, this is such a tight matchup between Inertia and the boys, but Inertia does end up taking it 2-1.